Hello, hello, it is me, Legendary, and today I bring a Yap video that is going to be all about reviewing the Update 63 Devbranch, now that we've had a chance to play with the toys, interacted with the changes that the devs envisioned for the Foxhole Airborne update. I think it's about time that we settle in and get an opinion about what Airborne is going to be like, as well as give some thoughts on some of the changes that took place over the last 3 weeks. Now, of course, we were very hyped for the initial onset of the Airborne update, but as Max said during the dev stream, there were certainly a lot of material that was not covered during this time. So for the purposes of this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to review a lot of the predictions that I made over the course of last year. I'm going to reflect on the changes that were shown during the dev stream itself. And of course, I'm going to give my opinion on how the war is more or less going to play out in terms of the new content that's being added. All right, so that's the main goal for today. There's a lot of things to talk about, so let's just jump right into it. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is reviewing the actual bingo card that I released on my YouTube channel's post. And again, this is just more of a reflection of how close was I to the actual content that was released. The reason why I didn't fill in the bingo card on the day of the dev stream itself is purely because the devs did say that there was going to be a lot of stuff added in the Devbranch itself or in the update itself that they didn't cover in the stream. So I didn't feel quite right just ticking things off straight away or ticking things that I wasn't quite sure how it played out. So I waited the entire duration for Devbranch to complete, and I think I'm now in a spot to say whether or not I got something right or how it played out. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over all the things that I sort of predicted, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of reflect on how it actually got skipped or how it actually got implemented and what we're going to be playing with for the next couple of updates. So let's just jump right into it. The first thing is obviously the Stratosphere air region was not implemented. I think the main reason for this is they kind of want airplanes to feel under threat from ground-based AA. Now, the initial version of ground-based AA is not that intimidating, but I do say that if you have a couple of flak guns set up, if you have a couple of aerial interceptor arrays set up, as well as the 20mm anti-aircraft guns in certain key locations, I do feel like the devs really want to play with this idea of air just isn't its own separate entity. Now, of course, the big downside to this not being implemented, in my opinion, is the fact that we have really, really goofy border travel mechanics. So the way that border travel now works is you fly to the border, you have a couple of seconds to engage like a teleport across to the other side. If you don't engage in that teleport, your plane basically just explodes into tiny little splinters and you lose a very expensive game asset. So it's a little bit goofy, and there's also some really weird things that happen when there is server lag or if you can't cross to the other side. So a little disappointed that the devs didn't really put into too much consideration for the idea of, you know, flying above the hex and then flying back down. But honestly speaking, it's very in line with the way that Foxhole border mechanics work. So I'm not too disappointed in it, but we have really, really goofy border mechanics as a result. Right, the next thing is a new type of facility resource was not added. So no rare materials for oils or rare materials for coal. We did get a smaller version of a rare alloy that's used in the production of uniforms. I don't regard that as a new resource. It kind of just looks like another version for rare metals. So I'm not going to count that as a successful bingo slot being applied. So leave it at that. Devs basically just used resources that we already have. We make planes out of pecons, we make it out of assembly materials, we make it out of rare alloys, and we leave it at that. All right, the next thing is aircraft is facility lock. I'm actually going to take this one because I do believe that the majority of aircraft that we are playing with is indeed facility locked. Yes, we do have scouts that you can hammer out. Kind of got that prediction wrong a little bit, but for the most part, like 90% of the content that we're working with is facility locked. So it's not just the aircraft, but also the anti-aircraft weapons, the ammunition. A lot of it is facility locked as well, or at the very least, you can make it at a facility with some supplementary hammering happening in some parts of your logi towns. So I feel like I kind of got this one right. So if you want to fly a bomber, you have to build a facility to make it. If you want to fly a fighter, you're going to need a facility to make it. And everything else in between kind of fits that design that the devs are playing around with. All right, the next thing is weather stations are essential. Got that one completely wrong. The devs started implementing weather effects on planes, but I think for the most part they're taking it a little bit safe, not introducing too many hurdles to using aircraft. So I'll leave this one up for maybe a future update, but for now, you don't need a weather station to fly your plane. That's just straight up not necessary. And for the most part, severe weather really only impacts visibility. So it's not like you take off and if it's too strong winds or if it's a snowstorm or if it's a rainstorm or a thunderstorm, your plane just, takes damage over time. That is not a thing. That doesn't happen. So for now, the only thing that really gets impacted is visibility, and it gives ground crews a chance to basically hit you with flak before you have a chance to really zone in where you want to hit. So there are some downsides to it, but you don't need a weather station to see where you're going. So I got that one wrong. The next thing is bombers will cost rare alloys. Absolutely. Actually, most aircraft uses rare alloys, so it's not just bombers. You do need rare alloys, obviously, to make your fighter frames and your seaplane frames and your various dive bomber / torpedo bomber frames. So, yeah, the rare game is on. Go scoop fields, get rare metals. Please don't dump the salvage on the ground. Please submit them to your local Happy MSUM printer or your nearby bunker base. Yeah, what can I say? It's just it's the rare alloy game, so we have to get used to it. Alright, the next thing is existing weapons get an AA mode. Definitely. That is in the game. It's actually going to be a big part of defending your various facilities, your bunker bases, and even your logi routes. We've seen a lot of interesting gameplay mechanics come out of the pre-patch war. Scout swarms are indeed quite intimidating, and I think a lot of players have suddenly realized that, hey, I actually need to go make some EMGs and put them everywhere so that we actually have a chance to do some logistics in these particular regions. So yeah, the EMGs have an alternate firing mode. They're kind of fun to play in. They're not very, very effective just yet, but I do believe that you're not supposed to be able to just make an EMG and then that's going to defend against rare alloy costing bombers and planes. I don't think that's quite fair for the people that actually make the planes. So it is definitely something. It's not the perfect solution. And I do think that we're going to see a lot of iterations on more existing weapons getting more AA modes, like vehicles, tripod weapons maybe. But the devs are definitely trying to make air really shine in the Airborne update. So I could totally respect it. Alright, the next thing is new AA ammo for AA ammo variants for artillery. This isn't implemented. We do have a new anti-aircraft flak gun, but it uses its own ammo. And you can't swap that ammo into existing weapons yet. So, didn't get this one right, but on that note, did actually play with the new AA ammo. We called it the Flak 70, so it's a 70mm shell. It has some extra letterings to it, but the idea here is it's a shrapnel-based weapon, and it leaves like a little cloud around, and if planes go through it, they take damage and whatnot. And the initial version was really rough to use, but I think the dev settled into a nice spot for it right now. It's quite strong in large groups, so if you want to effectively have AAA cover, player-manned AAA cover, put like 5 or 6 of these in a hex, and the lone transport plane or the lone dive bomber trying to hit your stuff is going to have a really bad time. All right, the next thing is AI controlled tier 3 bunkers. Forget it. We don't have AI garrisons to shoot air whatsoever. The only time that AI interacts with airplanes is if their landing gear's down and they're touching the ground. That's it. So don't expect any help from your bunker base, or don't expect any help from G houses unless the planes are literally crash landed or properly landed nearby. So no AI at all. And I think, again, the devs are trying to make the aircraft shine for the Airborne update. Kind of makes sense. But yeah, got that one wrong. Maybe in a future update. All right, tier 3 airfields is a super weapon. Now, we can argue this one because we actually don't have tier 3 airfields. The devs kind of teased it with the concept art, but ultimately the net result is we actually only have 2 tiers of airfields. So we have tier 1 airfields that can launch fighters, dive bombers, torpedo bombers. And then we have tier 2 airfields that can launch heavy bombers and transport planes. So in my opinion, the tier 2 airfields meet this condition. And in my opinion, bombers are very, very strong. We got to test them. I was on the receiving end of a lot of bombers during Devbranch. They are quite destructive. Having a couple of these on top of your bunker base, or on top of your facility, or inside your Logi town that you're playing in for the last couple of days, is going to make you question life whether or not you want to continue playing, especially if they get to drop all their payload and they get to escape with everything intact. So I do feel like bombers are game-ending weapons. They're like railstorm cannons. It's like a battleship that, gets to bombard your stuff and you have no way to cure effort. I do feel like they are very strong. But technically speaking, they launch from tier 2 airfields, not tier 3 ones. So I will leave it blank, but I feel like I got the spirit of this one correct. All right, the next one is entry-level planes will be scouts. Yes, absolutely. You hammer them out. They cost armats. They don't require a facility. They have really easy controls. Really easy controls. You can kind of mess up. Just don't fly into a tree or into a watchtower, and you should be fine. So this is going to be the thing that people learn how to fly in. We've seen some interesting things. Moydog released a video where he showcased destroying Logi trucks with the Warden Scout plane very effectively. So definitely the gateway drug into flying in the air. So there's no question about it. Right, the next one is aircraft will be split into 3 tiers. Absolutely. So we have scouts as your tier 1 planes. You have fighters and dive bombers and torpedo bombers as your tier 2 planes. And then you have your bombers and troop transports. And those are your tier 3 planes, and they require steel, and they naturally progress inside the facility tech tree as well. So your tier 1 planes doesn't require anything. You can hammer them out. They just require the tech for the plane itself. Tier 2 planes require tier 2 facilities because they're made with processed construction based materials. And then your bombers require steel. Cool. So pretty straightforward. Next one is dry dock style aircraft assembly. So we do have a large pad that you use to build the frame in. And at the start of Devbranch, this took an excessive amount of time to accomplish. For example, to print off a fighter took 36 hours. To print off a bomber was like 2 or 3 days worth of printing. So in the initial onset of Devbranch, I would have taken this one, but the devs really, really rolled it back quite a bit. And we're now in a situation where you do build a large pad to make your frame, and then you spend 3 to 6 hours to print off the various plane frame that you want. However, interestingly, we actually have a unique way to assemble aircraft as a vehicle asset in Foxhole. So in previous versions of the game, if you wanted to assemble a tank, it was very much just deposit a crate or drive a tank to a depot, submit it, and then retrieve it anytime that you want. Then they released tank variants where they added an extra step where you had to take a base tank and take it to a facility to upgrade into something. but you were always able to take the vehicle, put fuel in it, put shells in it, and then immediately go start fighting. With Airborne, we kind of have a new way that we need to prep and use airplanes, in the fact that you need a specific building to make the frames, then you need a specific building to make the parts or the components, like the engines that go into the plane. Then you need a specific building to make a uniform that is required to be worn if you want to fly the plane. And then you need a building to specifically make your ordnance. So even though we don't have a specific dry dock style assembly, we do have hangar assembly. And in my opinion, it kind of feels the same way that the dry dock works. Now, the dry dock, you build the dry dock, you bring all the resources to it. Once the ship is finished building, you then use the dry dock as a way to teleport resources and ordnance into the vessel itself. And I kind of get the same vibe with aircraft assembly, even though the structure itself is a world-spawned asset. So I am going to take this one because it does feel like it's a culmination of resources to build. It's just not a facility-built structure. It's a world-spawned structure. And it's going to be absolutely hilarious getting people to coordinate how to assemble their bombers and where they're going to keep their resources and getting train tracks next to the hangar. So it's going to be very interesting and exciting times, and I really hope there aren't any civil wars. So we'll see how it goes. Cool. We got airplanes. Yippee! Free space. Cool. Got an airplane. Good job, Dev, man. Next thing is infantry gear won't aim up. For the majority of the part, this is true. We did get some binos that can sort of spot into the sky, but binos don't really fire. And for the most part, infantry are basically completely exposed to being hit by aircraft. Now, we've done some experimentation with using tripod weapons and in-place weapons that don't specifically have an AA mode as a sort of scuffed anti-aircraft weapon. We've had some moderate success with a couple of them, but the overwhelming opinion is if there's a plane, you need an EMG. If there's a plane, you need another plane. So don't get used to the idea of being able to attack airplanes from the ground, specifically as infantry, and for that reason, this one does get ticked. So infantry, you can't really aim up. You can sort of see planes with the binos, but you can't attack them. So get used to dashing to the closest EMG to go and fight, if indeed you do hear the overhead engines going off. All right, the last thing in this row is the Tier 2 air radar bunker, so spotting with air sonar. So we do have the aerial interceptor array. It is a Tier 3 bunker structure, which requires advanced bunkers. So I don't quite hit the mark with this one, and it also just straight up spots airplanes with its passive radar and its built-in sort of spotter position. It's an interesting superstructure the way that it's implemented in the game, because the devs originally required this superstructure to relay coordinates for the flak guns, the flak 70 guns, to actually hit their marks. And I have a YouTube short up of like the old version of how this was meant to be used, but that has basically been reworked because the old flak guns were horrendously inaccurate. Now with the new flak guns, where you can just direct fire them, a lot more usable, and has taken away some of the usability of the aerial interceptor array that the devs released. But that being said, with my original prediction video, I said that this would be a structure where you would use sonar vision to spot airplanes so that you can then line up your anti-aircraft guns or your like variant artillery guns. That's not the case. So I kind of have like a Tier 3 bunker prediction, but I just kind of got it wrong. And then the Tier 2 bunker also just kind of got it wrong. So I'm going to take this one, but I was quite close. All right. The next thing is no anti-aircraft garrison bunker. I was right. Yep. So there was no magical howitzer that you build, and it points up and it shoots a plane that flies over your bunker base. That's just not a thing. Even though I did say that maybe that would be something that you connected to a Tier 3 bunker, and then your howitzers would retaliate, or your AT garrisons would point up and shoot. we didn't get that at all. Devman was like, no AI, no clanker defenses. We just have to fight ourselves. So we're gonna see how that plays out. Cool. Then underground fortresses is designed to counter bombers. The devs didn't outright specifically say that this was a thing. Obviously, we do have the advantage of underground bunkers being able to protect against bombing raids. Bombers can't destroy a underground fortress unless they drop paratroopers that will bring demolitions down to finish it off. So for the most part, underground fortresses basically survive bombing raids. So I'm going to take this one, even though the devs didn't explicitly say that that's what the purpose for the underground fortress is. It just kind of played out to be that way. All right. The next thing is dive bombers will use torpedoes. Yeah, I got that one wrong. Dive bombers don't use torpedoes at all. I really thought that they would, but we did kind of find out that the Wardens got a torpedo-specific bomber. And kind of got that whole dynamic wrong as well. But for the most part, the Myrmidon dive bomber, the actual legitimate dive bomber, does not use torpedoes. So got that one wrong as well. All right, the next one is scouts will use ammo that harms boats. Absolutely, that is definitely a thing. Oops, I knew I was going to grab the wrong thing eventually. There we go. Scouts do indeed have ordnance that harm boats, specifically small vessels. So both the Warden Scout and the Colonial Scout have a weapon or a secondary weapon that specifically harms small boats and freighters, etc. So we should expect scouts within the early game naval gameplay, as well as late game naval gameplay, where you could probably use a scout to go harass logi lines and freighters. So we have to accept the fact that if you're going to be playing on the water, you're going to be making anti-aircraft boats. Just start dialing that idea into the back of your head. Or if you're taking large amounts of logi in freighters, or you're doing a logi run, get your local airmen to escort your planes to their destination. Or, sorry, escort your ships to their destination. So yeah, get used to that. Basically, running a freighter without an escort now is a bad idea. Because scouts absolutely smash freighters to bits. And might also be a reason to use the new light freighter to minimize losses in those certain situations. All right. The next thing is aircraft classes will be symmetrical. I am going to take this one because I do feel like I mostly got it correct. The only real asymmetry that we have is with the fact that the Wardens get an extra seaplane, but that's because it needs to play with their unique aircraft carrier. And the torpedo bomber and the dive bomber serve somewhat of a similar role, except obviously the colonial one can attack ground targets and the Warden one can actually destroy large ships, whereas the colonial one can't. So they do serve somewhat the same role, a little bit different, but I mean, both sides got a fighter, both sides got a scout, both sides got a bomber, both sides got a torpedo bomber, and some form of close air support. But obviously the devs put a bit of an asymmetric spin on it. So I'm confident in taking this one off. I think I got it mostly right. And just some slight variance in the gameplay loop that we are going to be experiencing. All right, the next one is airfields are pre-placed by devs. Oh, goodness gracious, I really need to lock that thing. Okay, there we go. Yes, I did get this one right. The main advantage of this is there'll be no squabbling over open space to be building your airfields. You won't have to like clanman bad some dude's facility because you need to fit an airfield into this particular open area, and you know there's like half a train track or a small train track blocking the whole thing or the blueprint. We don't have that at all. It's all pre-placed, and most interestingly, the devs actually said that all the airfields are just going to be in the game world for the next couple of wars. So check out the world map, find out where the airfields are, go take a look, get used to it, at least for now. All right, next one is transport planes can drop VIX. Thank goodness this is not a thing. I did predict that there's going to be the dropping of CVs and LUVs and light tanks and stuff like that. It's not in the game, thank goodness. I'm actually very happy that I don't take that one because cool, it's completely left open. The next one is kamikaze planes will be possible. Now, So, interesting conversation with this one. The traditional idea of a kamikaze plane doesn't exist, so you can't like fly a scout or a dive bomber or something into a building and then the physical asset itself deals damage to structures itself. That doesn't work. But technically speaking, I can take a torpedo bomber and I can put two players inside the torpedo bomber. Both of them have a pilot uniform, and both of them have a parachute, and both of them have a cutler with RPGs. And technically speaking, I can get both of them to jump or eject out of the torpedo bomber. The torpedo bomber crashes onto the ground, but the two pilots can land in a facility, pull out an RPG, and start killing your cranes. So, I think in spirit I got it. The actual mechanic in-game doesn't exist. So, I'm not going to take it, but I think I got very, very close to the idea, concept behind it. And then the collie one is just hilariously easy. The collie dive bomber can actually just harm cranes. You could just take the collie dive bomber, drop your payloads on the cranes. Currently, it doesn't destroy it, but it gets very, very close. So, if you're a colonial facility hater, take a dive bomber, get a friend, bomb the hell out of a crane holding an SPG or an RC, and as you're flying away, get your rear gunner to eject out the plane, pull out a lunaire, and drop like 4 or 5 more lunaire bombs or lunaire grenades to finish a crane off. That's just something that, it's not quite kamikaze, but you're putting your plane at risk when you're doing this. So again, I think I got it in spirit, but the actual mechanic of plane hitting building and building dying doesn't exist. So I'm not going to take it. All right, next one is large holes do not get nerfed. So this is a negative hex. Oh, sorry, negative hex. Sorry, this is a negative square. One of the biggest changes I wanted in the game is large holes to be able to be patched at sea, so that we don't have to cancel naval invasions. We don't have to cancel bombardment ops that take forever to plan and forever to execute. And I'm really glad that I'm wrong. I'm happy to be wrong with this one. So the devs actually did implement a way to fix large holes. So at bare minimum, if you get hit by a torpedo or if you get hit by a 300 mil shot, you can back out of the danger zone, put metal beams in the hole to patch it up. It then creates like a vulnerable spot that can easily be reopened by another source of damage, but it will reopen as a small hole that can then be fixed with BMATs. And that's kind of how I envisioned how it should be nerfed way back when, like almost 3 years ago now. This is the sort of feedback that I gave, and I'm happy to see that we have a version of it. So I'm happy that I was wrong in this one, because definitely large holes did get a nerf in a big way. And at bare minimum, if your bluefin now gets hit by a torpedo, it is not game over. It's not game over anymore. You can get it fixed, patch it back up, anchor it, and then your naval invasion can continue. And then the final one, bit of a freebie here. Planes will be amphibious. I have landed multiple planes in water. I've taken off from water. They're super fun, super easy to, like, ridiculously easy to do. I would argue it's easier to take off from water than taking off from ground in certain circumstances. Just generally speaking, water tends to be more open, no random planes scattered about, no random trucks that can hit you. So amphibian planes, super easy to do. Landing some of them is a little bit hairy. The White Raven is quite hard to land in water. So it's a lot easier to land certain planes on the surface and other planes on ground. So yeah. Also, for the love of goodness gracious, for new players that get inside the torpedo bomber, the Warden torpedo bomber, the Warden torpedo bomber is not amphibious. Please learn from my mistake. Don't do it. When I first got a torpedo bomber, I was like, oh, cool, I'll just shoot my torpedoes and then land in the water. Oops. Yeah, no, it's not amphibious. So the amphibious planes, go learn them. Don't make my mistake and have fun doing it. Okay, so that's it for the bingo card. I also reflect a lot on the mechanics that the devs announced and released. I think I got quite a few things correct, got a couple of things wrong. And for the most part, I'm quite satisfied that in the way that the devs implemented a few things. I will say that out of everything, I'm kind of jaded that we didn't get an air region, but obviously that would have been a nightmare to balance certain things as well, because there are definitely certain planes that would have performed quite positively if there was a air region above head. Specifically the bombers. I'm specifically talking about if bombers could just skip certain regions and not have to go through the perils of going through border travel, then we may have had bombers in places in inconvenient spots and inconvenient times. So, yeah, I'm a little bit sad that wasn't implemented, but it is what it is, and this is where things are right now. Cool. Okay, so that's it for the bingo card. Reflecting on all these things, the next thing that I want to do is I want to go over basically all the new assets that are being added into the game, as well as the major balance reworks that a lot of the existing tools inside the game was affected. Now, I'm not going through every small detail, but I did go through the patch notes, and I kind of highlighted the ones that I feel is the most significant in how this is going to shape how we play the game. So for this next bit, I'm basically going to go over all the new stuff that was added and all the major changes that you should be aware of, and what I think is going to have an impact in the future of Foxhole sort of gameplay mechanics. Right. So to do this, I'm going back to my traditional tried and tested way of figuring out what's good and what's bad with a tier list. Yay! I haven't done a tier list in like 7 months, and this is like one of my most asked feature to do. So we're going to do a tier list on the assets that were released, which is basically what weapons do we have to play with, and as well as the changes. So the way that this is going to work is I'm basically going to go over the Devbranch change notes from top to bottom. I'm just going to basically give my opinion on what I think, how impactful it will be on the actual gameplay, and I'm ranking them based on the impact on the game from S to F. So the way that this tier list is going to work is if I think a change or a new weapon or a new asset in the game is going to have a significant impact on how we play the game, then it's going to be in S tier. So if you don't build this, or if you don't add this to your own like builds or your own bases or your own armies or however you play the game, if you miss this out on the S tier, then you're definitely going to be in the back foot. So if it's an S tier, definitely try and make it. Definitely try and play with it. It is a significant change that impacts the game. And then F is quite the opposite of that spectrum. F is like very low priority. It's almost like something that you would never really have to worry about. So that's the sort of grading scale that we're going with here. So S, very impactful, very important. You have to play with it. You have to acknowledge it. Around the BC mark is if this is a gameplay interest of yours, like if you're like a naval player and something isn't one of the new ships is in the B rank, then you should be aware of it. And then F, you can kind of safely ignore it. Cool. So let's go over everything. There's a lot of changes. So I'm going to see if I can get this under 2 hours. So let's just start with the scout planes. I know I said I'm going from top to bottom with the dev notes, but I wanted to start with the scout planes because I do feel like the scout planes is the entry point for Airborne, and it would kind of feel a little bit weird if I don't talk about the scouts firsthand. So to start things off, let's talk about the Warden scout plane. So the Warden scout plane has 2 main functions. One, it can launch mini torpedoes that is very effective against light vessels. So this will be gunboats and smaller. And it also can detect air intel, as of the current version of it, within 100 meters around it. So the scout plane is your entry-level sky watchtower. And of course, it is armed with a 20 millimeter machine gun that is pretty good at poking and chipping away at other air targets, as well as some armored vehicles. I will say that both scout planes received quite a lot of nerfs during the Devbranch, The first original version of the Warden scout plane was ridiculously strong because a solo scout plane could destroy a seaport, and 2 or 3 of them working in unison could destroy a dry dock while it was printing a vessel. So the devs saw this, they saw the footage, and they were like, oh hell no, they can't have that. So luckily, the Warden scout plane received some much needed nerfs so that we could actually build some large ships on the colonial side. But right now, I do think that the Warden scout plane is very impactful. You're definitely going to see it in use throughout the entire duration of a war. So I'm going to put this at the A tier. It definitely has some strengths to it. It also has the unique strength of not being very desirable to be stolen by colonial players. And the reason for this is the Collie side can't make the secondary ammo that the Warden scout plane has. So the Warden scout plane uses mini torpedoes. Colonials straight up don't have a way to make mini torpedoes. So it's not very desirable to steal scout planes from the Wardens. Of course, there will obviously be a dude who will go and capture one, and you'll have a couple of torpedo shots with it. But for the most part, it's quite strong and it's quite impactful. This leads me into the colonial scout plane, and for the opposite reason, this one is not as impactful in my opinion as the Warden one. The reason for this is, despite the fact that it can be stolen by the Warden side and be used by the Warden side, because the Wardens can make the hull breaker mine, which this plane uses. The other advantage that the other disadvantage that this one really has is with the fact that it doesn't really gel well with the colonial doctrine for its gameplay loop. So the Warden one works really well because it specifically interacts with the balance of the small vessels, whereas the colonial one really doesn't. And the reason why I say this is, if you missed your mark with the colonial scout plane, you technically make a hazard for your own team by now dropping a mine inside of a battle. Whereas the Warden one, if you miss the Warden torpedoes, you just kind of miss and you have to go reload and try again. This one, you could be playing against your own team if you're not careful. So because of this one is quite hairy to use, and it might be a situation where colonial players won't really use this one and rather rely on their slightly superior small vessels to carry the naval battle forward. Whereas the Warden one, I could definitely see Warden players going out and sniping small ships with this. So for that reason, I'm going to put the colonial one at B. It's still going to serve the same purpose of harassing vehicles and doing scouting, etc. But it's not as combat efficient as the Warden one. And that might be a good thing. We'll have to see how that plays out. All right. So let's move on to proper planes now, as some people call it. First, let's talk about the Warden fighter. So this is the Harbinger. So the Harbinger has 2 weapons. It fires 20 mil anti-aircraft ammo, and it also fires 14.5 as a close air support role. You can use the 14.5 to shoot aircraft. We have found that it is not very efficient at doing so. It's kind of like a last resort weapon. So there's a very clear idea behind this plane. You use your 20 mil to shoot planes, and if there's no planes for you to shoot, you swap to your 14.5 and you harass ground targets. That's kind of the vibe that this one is giving off. For the most part, I find that the Harbinger is pretty good at what it's doing. So I'm going to put it under A tier. Keep in mind that the 14.5 is very situational. You're mostly going to be hitting heavy trucks with it. You could also harass trains with it. And in some very, 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 very specific situation, you can also hit Kali 120 artillery with it. Now, keep in mind, we've been practicing this one. We have some countermeasures on how to counter the Harbinger. But for unguarded targets, for low G lines that aren't protected very well, for people that don't respect and have precaution against it, this plane can cause a lot of harm. So definitely play with it. It's pretty good at what it does, and if there's no real air targets for you to hit, you switch on the 14.5 and you have a bit of fun. So it's a good plane. It's going to be fun to play with. I think a lot of Wardens are going to be messing around with this plane, so expect to see it quite often. Right, the next one is the Collie Fighter. So unlike the Warden one, this one has one role and one role only, and that is to fight other planes. That's pretty much it. You're not really going to be strafing with this. It only has 20 mil guns, and essentially you're supposed to send this thing to stop bombers and to stop dive bombers. Torpedo bombers and other fighters. For that purpose, gonna get a slightly lower rank, because if you don't have aircraft to fight with it, you're kind of just wasting your time in playing it. So this is very much either you send it with your bombers to go fight or to defend and to be point defense, or you use it to QRF. Whereas the Warden one, if you're bored, you can't just jump at the Warden plane and go like hunt a train or go hunt heavy trucks. Can't really do that well with the Blind Silver. So it's really good at fighting planes. It recently got some buffs to its low speed, which means it can be a little bit maneuverable. But for the most part, yeah, all you're doing is fighting planes. That's what you're gonna do in this plane and nothing else. And in my opinion, gives it a bit of a shallow gameplay loop. So I would have really liked for this thing to also provide close air support. But of course, we're going to talk about the dive bomber in just a bit, and it specifically has a different role in that situation. All right, the next one is the Warden White Raven. No way to sugarcoat this. This plane is awesome, but not for balance reasons. Because I do think right now that the White Raven's a little bit overtuned. It's really, really, really strong at quickly eliminating plane parts off of specific air targets. But I think the White Raven is really strong for two other reasons. One, the White Raven can be built using an oil facility only. So the reason why this is important is factoring in what planes are supposed to do. The White Raven is basically the symmetrical equivalent of the Collie fighter, in the sense that you use the Collie fighter to fight bombers. I do feel like this is also something that you would have to whip out and use to fight bombers. The only difference is this plane can be built using process construction materials, assembly materials 2, and assembly materials 3. These are all things that you can produce very easily with a tier 3 oil facility. The colonial one, you also need to include coal inside of its manufacturing process. So technically speaking, based currently on the facility gameplay loop, you can make White Ravens in a single facility. And that's its unique strength, in my opinion. It's not its damage that it does with its guns. Obviously, that's a topic for a different discussion from frontline players or air players. I don't know what we're going to call them, pilot players. But in my opinion, from the Logi guy, I would really like to make a shit ton of these, because they're quite cheap. They perform the same role as a QRF vessel. On top of the second factor, and that's it can be launched from water, which means that you could technically land this plane in your facility, hide it in between boxes, put it behind gates, and some other funky tricks that you can also do with it. And if a bomber enters your region, you don't have to go to an airfield to QRF it. You just push this thing into the water, and you launch it and you go fight. So this is, in my opinion, the utility of this, plus the fact that it can be produced from a single facility as opposed to multiple facilities. In my opinion, I think that the White Raven is exceptionally good. Definitely play with it. Get used to its sort of landing mechanics and its taxiing. It's a little bit weird. You have to get used to it. But if you master it, you're going to be an absolute menace to stopping colonial air raids. And I think that's the key strength that this plane has. On top of the fact that it interacts directly with the Warden carrier, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Okay. So the next one is we're going to talk about the close air support aircraft. So first is the Colonial Myrmidon. The Colonial Myrmidon, in my opinion, is an S-rank vehicle. So this is the best that the Colonial Air Force has to offer. The Myrmidon is exceptionally good at almost everything it does if you use the plane as it's intended. Now, a lot of people in Devbranch had this idea of when you use the dive bomber, you can play with it solo, you don't need a rear gunner, you don't need an escort, and a lot of people sort of had this arcadey way of playing with the Myrmidon in the fact that you can sort of bomb relatively undefended targets and it feels really strong. In my opinion, when the Myrmidon is going to be used correctly, so you're going to be using it with air cover, and you're going to be specifically targeting subsystems of targets, I think it's exceptionally good. It has a really high chance to turret things, and currently, turreting a large vessel, in my opinion, is much more destructive than putting a large hole into it. Because right now, it takes about 40 to 50 metal beams to fix a large hole, and then you can sort of hammer out BMATs if there's any subsequent damage. Now, to be fair, the torpedo bomber makes 2 holes as opposed to just 1 most of the times. But for the most part, a single strike bomb hitting a turret on a large vessel will require 250 metal beams to fix. There ain't no way that you're going to be fixing a turret in the middle of combat. It's just not going to be a thing. So, in my opinion, I think the dive bomber is exceptionally good at close air support. It's really good against naval targets. It's really good at tracking and disabling warden tanks. Maybe not good at killing, but keep in mind that I believe that the best way to supplement colonial gameplay is to provide a tool that can close off damage against other targets. 99% of the time, when colonial tank lines wants to collapse on a warden tank line, it comes down to the opposing tank line being forced into a all-in scenario. The majority of the time, this is the large tanks in the middle being blocked, being tracked, or being turreted. This is something that the dive bomber does really well. The dive bomber is exceptionally good at tracking tanks, it's exceptionally good at turreting them, and it can also engine them as well. And there are hundreds of clips on YouTube showcasing this dive bomber's potential to do so. So in my opinion, the late game warden tank line is in big trouble. Because if the central, HDD horde or the STD horde or the couple of super heavies that makes up the spearhead of the tank line itself gets turreted, tracked, or fueled by one of these things, there's no other way to say it. The Bardishas are just going to hold W, or the Nemesis are just going to hold W and wipe your tank line. And this is something that the Myrmidon can do, and the Wardens literally don't have that gameplay loop at all. So in my opinion, the Myrmidon is great. The devs can tweak around the damage a little bit, but its key main goal, close air support. And it does that role very well. And I know a lot of Myrmidon mains that are coming out the woodworks now are like super upset that this thing doesn't just insta-kill every tank that it hits. In my opinion, you use its 4 dive bombs on 4 different targets, and you target 4 different subsystems. And if those bombs land in the correct way, with air cover, etc., 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 exceptionally good play. And super fun. I've flown it a couple of times. I've hit a couple of trees with it as well. I'm not the greatest at flying planes, but it has been fun playing with them. So if you're playing Colonial and you're playing in Collie Air Force and you have air superiority with lots of fighters, etc., 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 and all the White Ravens all dead, you're going to have a field day with this thing. You're going to be disabling tanks, and you are going to be the cause for the Bardishas to hold W and win the fight. That's the main goal for the Myrmidon. So great playing it. And I'll cut the the Myrmidon praise short right here. All right. Its counterpart, the Warden Torpedo Bomber. Right now, this is really strong. I do believe that this plane is still quite buggy. So I'm going to review this plane assuming that the devs sort out a lot of the bugs associated with it. Because right now, you can kind of use the torpedo bomber as a dive bomber to instantly make 2 large holes and do significant hull damage to planes in certain sort of dive bomby scenarios, right? So in my opinion, this plane isn't ready yet. There's still some bugs to it. I really hope that the devs spend more time fixing it over the weekend for Live War starting on Monday. So for now, if it's adjusted correctly, I think it's going to go into B tier. Now, I know a lot of Naval players are going to be like, what? That's impossible. It's a flying Naki. It does so much damage. Keep in mind that this thing needs to launch from airfields. It's very predictable, and this thing is huge. The surface area of this plane is massive, to the point that you could put 4 fighters on this thing and just shred it to bits. The Myrmidon can basically only have like 1 or 2 planes trailing it. This thing easily can have 4 blind silvers on it. And I want to try and figure out how these planes are going to be used based on a realistic combat scenario, right? On Devbranch, we've seen dive bombers bomb the shit out of large ships, but that's because those large ships aren't really fighting back. And also keep in mind that the planes that were used in these tests were spawned from free resources. That might not be a thing in Live War. A lot of people might think like, oh, I'm going to build a torpedo bomber and then I'm just going to dominate, the colonial fleets. Keep in mind, for every torpedo bomber that gets built, it's like 2.5 collie fighters that it's going to have to contend with, on top of the fact that the plane needs to travel low to drop its torpedo. Currently, it doesn't do that because it's buggy. So you're going to have to also risk flying through Sombras, because you're not going to be torpedoing Sombras, right? You're going to have to fly through Sombras or the anti-aircraft boat to actually hit your mark. Plus, the devs are tweaking and playing around with the idea that this plane needs a long run-up before it can drop its payload and do damage. In contrast, the colonial dive bomber, you can kind of just drop the bomb anytime that you want, or you can use the air brake to aim the bomb down, get in a low angle, and then drop and release and do damage. This one, you basically need a runway before the torpedoes can launch and be used effectively, once the bugs are fixed. So I honestly want to say this might be C tier, but I don't like the sort of label that it's gotten of like the flying Naki. Yeah, it could drop torpedoes, but realistically speaking, the devs are putting a lot of limitations for it actually effectively being used in that way. So once the bugs are fixed and the plane works as intended, I think it's going to be a B tier asset. Definitely roll it out with a destroyer or a large ship harassing stuff. But make sure you have air cover as well. Make sure you have a couple of White Ravens following behind you, or else, the collie anti-aircraft or the collie fighter will just get behind you and shred you to teeny tiny little bits. Okay, so moving on, let's talk about the bombers. I'm going to do both of them at the same time. Bombers, in the game, make them. They're exceptionally good. My God Almighty. If a bomber gets above your facility, you're not going to have to worry about M-subs anymore. Really strong. Very dangerous. The entire game is going to revolve around bomber gameplay. There's no way to sugarcoat it. If a bomber gets into your stuff, into your train yard, into your facility that's producing bombers while they're printing, if a bomber gets into your facility making bombers, you're going to have a bad day. That being said, highly recommend facility players get used to the idea of storing your stuff in different places other than cranes. Maybe don't print a BT and then leave it hanging on a crane, because if Mr. Bomber finds it, it's just going to destroy the crane and then you lose it. So yeah, we're going to have to do some adjustments. Also, this thing is hilariously good against large ships. You guys are worrying about torpedo bombers. My God, oh Christ almighty, when this thing gets on top of a destroyer or a battleship and it runs the length of the large ship and drops all of its payload, it's just a billion small holes everywhere and you just sink to water damage. So, yeah. Game ending. Dangerous. A bomber being spotted is an Avengers level threat. I'm not even kidding. If you are playing in a large enough regiment to make them, if you have the rares for it, if you have the steels for it, if you have the AMs to make them. Send them out. Fuck shit up. Make sure they have an escort. They are exceptionally good. Cool. Transport planes. I'm going to be reviewing these separately because they serve different roles. The Warden one, I think, is a little bit LARPy. I think the only real big threat that the Warden transport plane had is the fact that it could drop satchel paratroopers. That strength has diminished significantly because the devs made a significant change to satchels, which I'll talk about near the end of the tier list. So because of this, and the fact that its range is quite limited, can basically travel 2.5 hexes before it runs out of fuel, and return, obviously. So I think the deep strike potential of the Warden transport plane isn't that high. So I'm going to put it under C tier. The Kali one, in contrast, has received some nerfs. I'm going to put it under A tier. I initially thought that this would be an S tier weapon. Definitely A tier now, but it's still significant. It's still strong. Landing in water, refueling from a barge, and then continuing on with your flight path means that Kali partisans can get all the way into Warden facilities. It's going to be dangerous. It's going to be scary. I think the true balance mechanic comes into play on the cost of the frames. Right now, the frames are very expensive. I think it's 12 alloys each since last time I checked. So, yeah, I do think that Colonials have a much stronger paratrooper gameplay loop than the Warden one. And if the frames were as cheap as they were at the start of Devbranch, Collies would have definitely had a much easier time making them. That being said, I do hope that this is a entry point for how air transport logistics is going to work someday. They can hold crates, but they aren't that great unless you're really doing emergency supplies. Like desperately need 16 crates of BMATs in a airfield. That's how I would use these in that scenario. But for its intended purpose, dropping paratroopers, the Kali one is just straight up better, and the Warden one, a little bit larpy. You really need a reason to do it, specifically because of the satchel nerf. Cool. Alright, that's basically it for all the aircraft. The big TLDR is, I think Colonials have the better close air support. Wardens have the better utility in the fact that its scout plane and its fighter serves a dual purpose as opposed to just also being relatively good against air. And then in terms of air superiority fighters, just realized I had the wrong icon. No, I did have the wrong icon. Ah. So, oops, sorry. This is the torpedo bomber. There we go. Fixed it. There we go. In terms of usability, Wardens have the better dual-purpose aircraft, and Colonials have the better key-specific planes to do certain tasks. We have the better paratrooper plane. We have the better dive bomber. But obviously, the big key thing to keep in mind is the main bombers themselves. Like I said, get these in your backline, you're going to have a bad day. And you're going to get people to log off. So, always QRF these things. Cool. Alright, let's move on to the small ships that they added. The devs added a whole bunch of small ships. So, let's quickly run through and talk a little bit about how the small ships impact the outcome of the war. So first is the Bellwether. So the Bellwether is a... Oops. What's going on here? I mess up. There we go. All right, so the Bellwether is a new ship that basically creates sea mine fields, and it has a small anti-aircraft gun, and its main goal is area denial. So you take one of these out, you put it in a defensive position to put out sea mines to prevent small ships and large ships from moving into certain areas. And then you can also sometimes use it offensively to sort of put a minefield behind an enemy navy to prevent ships from escaping. I think that the Bellwether is quite strong. It's not the perfect defense against Nakis. I'll talk about submarine counters a little bit later once I start getting to the prepared minefields individually. But for the most part, the purpose of this thing is to go out there and do air denial. And we have found that air denial is very, very strong. If you're forcing enemy ships to use their ordnance to destroy surface mines, and the surface mines are basically only costing salvage, you're kind of winning. If you're forcing a large ship to use its shells that was produced in an MPF that use sulfur to produce to destroy something that only is made from salvage, you are winning the war just purely on a resource trade-off. So for that reason, right now, Bellwether, really strong. Just make sure you defend it. Right. The next is the Das Crocodile. This is a very irrelevant boat, in my opinion, purely because this thing can't interact with facilities, and it's a damn mistake. I really wish that this thing could interact with crate transfer stations near a surface of the water, so that we can take Logi directly from our facilities into seaports where it's needed. Also, this thing only holds 60 crates. I would really like this to be a little bit more buffed to see 100 crates. But in some very niche scenario where you need to take Logi from one seaport to another and bring Logi back, this thing does serve a purpose, and it's much more maneuverable than the Iron Ship. So if you quickly need to log on and take crates of RMATs to an MPF seaport, and then take completed resources back to where you came from, so from one, let's say from an island facility or an island seaport to the mainland and then back, the Das Crocodile does a really good job. Just make sure you take an escort with it, because I do feel like this is supposed to be a target for the Warden scout plane, maybe the Colonial one as well. So do have an escort with it. Don't take it out solo. Make sure that you have a Sombra or you have a Fat Homer to go with it, or the Fat Homer. I'm going to call it the Fat Homer, but the Fat Homer. Make sure that you have something to go with it. Don't send it out on its own. But that being said, it's not completely useless. It's not completely like never make this, so it doesn't quite go into F tier, but it is pretty darn close. So yeah, Devman, please, Devman, listen to my cries. Make this thing interact with a crate transfer station, and it will instantly be a better vessel. So hopefully soon. Cool. The next thing is, let's talk about the small boats, so the light craft. So the first is the Warden anti-aircraft boat. I don't think this is a great boat. I played around with it a little bit. It goes into D tier. It bounces shots like crazy, so this might be like you take this boat out and hopefully the enemy wastes shells on it to bounce the shells off of it. But I do feel like the Wardens, their primary way that they're going to be defending the water from enemy aircraft or colonial aircraft is going to be the use of the White Raven, so the actual sea fighter, and scouts, and if the planes are close to the shore, the Harbinger will fill that role as well. So I feel like the Warden 1 isn't strictly necessary. You are really only going to be using it to like maybe escort a freighter here and there. I don't see it really have a significant role in the meta for anti-air for naval gameplay. So therefore, I do think that this one isn't that strictly necessary. Okay. In contrast, the Colonial one. So because the Colonial Scout is not as impactful as the Warden one, and we don't have a dedicated sea air superiority fighter, this one is very important. So I do think that the Sombra, despite the recent nerfs that it has received, you're going to be building a lot of these. To the point where I wouldn't be surprised if there would be specific MPFs on island hexes, if there are going to be island hex MPFs, that are just going to be dedicatedly producing these. They're super fast, they're super fun, they do crew ships like demons, and I do think that this is going to be the main thing that collies are going to be producing for naval gameplay. If Wardens are going to be sending out torpedo bombers to bomb your destroyers, your battleships, your etc., this is what you're going to be using to counter it. You're not going to be sending out too many of these because this requires an aircraft carrier. This thing just gets shot down by everything, so you're not going to be QRFing naval threats with it. So yeah, get used to be making Sombras and get used to playing in them. But on the plus side, they decrew all the Warden boats very, very easily. So that brings it to being quite a strong asset. If this didn't have a disable chance, of 30% as per the more older nerfs that got added to Devbranch, this would be S tier, definitely. But right now, it gets disabled very quickly. It can't really hold up anywhere in a fight, but it shreds scout planes. And when the dive bomber works correctly, aka it needs a lead up, this thing could block a torpedo shot or shred a torpedo bomber as it starts its torpedo run. So I do feel like this is going to be a mainstay colonial weapon. You're going to be seeing it. So I do think it's good. Not overpowered, but definitely good. Cool. Then the Warden medium boat. It recently got a rework with its turret, and it now has side shielding. I do think that this is going to see some gameplay, but again, I do feel like the Warden Scout does this thing's role better. So the Warden Scout can disable most colonial small ships with 2 mini torpedoes, and it can hold 4. So the Scout can kill ships very, very quickly. This thing, really slow, doesn't turn great, has pretty bad weapon coverage, and it kind of feels like this is supposed to be like a river patrol boat. So this is like the old Sharon, if I'm going to be super honest, the Warden medium boat. So, not the greatest. Might be intentionally badly designed or badly implemented on the first release. Devs reworked it a little bit, but I also think that it's still not as... I still feel like this is going to be the significant thing that we see in the water early games. This is just going to be supporting roles. Something to protect your naval assets from Sombras if all the Warden Scouts are taken out. So this is like your... This is like the... I would say this is like the sloppy seconds boat that shows up after the pilot for the scout plane gets downed. So if you take out some scout planes and then these ships show up, it means that the dudes that you killed ran out of scout planes, so they had to switch to something else. I feel like that's where the Warden medium boat really comes into play. Yeah. Not the greatest, but that might be by design. Cool. Colonial Strider. This thing. This thing kind of feels strong because the devs decided to give the Colonials a outlaw and a brigand combined into one ship. Now, this currently has a turret bug that makes it turn the turret very, very slowly. It's definitely a bug. I don't think it's intentional. Once this gets fixed, and the fact that it can cover itself from 360 threats, and it also got extra shielding around the back to make it much harder to decrew, this thing kind of slaps. So I'm going to put it on par with the Sombra. I'm not going to put it under overpowered tier because devs kind of tweaked how 40 mil is supposed to interact with naval vessels themselves. So it's still good and definitely going to be used to support naval landings and, you know, just protecting naval lines, etc. So yeah, the Strider is good. You're definitely going to see it. And due to the overall lack of performance of the Colonial Scout, in my opinion, doesn't have the stopping power, can create hazards for your team. We're not going to see as many scouts hanging over the water like the Wardens are. So this is going to be the primary gameplay loop. The Strider and the Sombra providing actual support to colonial naval forces. All right, I might be wrong with this one, but generally speaking, I feel like that the Strider and the Sombra just performs their roles better, and the people who can't afford Warden scout planes are going to be playing in Warden light vessels. That's the general vibe that I've gotten from Devbranch. All right, siege boats. Okay, I'm gonna classify both siege boats as S tier. These are incredibly dangerous weapons. They are incredibly strong. Building small islands is already a massive task when you're fighting gunboats that have HE mortars and fire mortars, and these ones come out earlier and they do demolition damage, which means they can technically shred concrete, specifically concrete that don't have AT garrisons, and a lot of waterside concrete don't incorporate AT garrisons themselves because it's more favorable to use howitzers instead. So these are S tier risks. They are super dangerous. They are super strong. I think the Warden one is slightly better, because it could also hit relic bases very accurately. But that being said, the Colonial one technically can do more DPS and has a higher chance to breach. So, yeah, dangerous vessels. These are going to be PvE monsters. You're going to have to go out and put minefields down with a bellwether to stop these from just destroying everything every single time you log off. So, get used to seeing them. They are incredibly strong. I'm really glad that they cost R mats, because if they costed B mats, it would have been horrible. So, we're definitely going to see them. They are a big threat. Very, very scary. They are basically water bombers. Obviously, you need more of them, and you don't need a facility to make them. But yeah, definitely, we're definitely gonna see them. They're definitely gonna be used by naval regiments to wipe out minefields, because they're good against minefields, and to wipe out coastal defenses and anything that is built within 50 meters of a waterline, which is basically 99% of all the small islands. So we might not see small island facilities or bunker bases ever again, and the reason why is going to be the Blackguard and the Lucian. And yeah, we'll have to see how it plays out. But dangerous little boats. Okay. Then the final small vessel to talk about is the Sharon rework. Sharon rework is really good. Played around with it a little bit. Saw a lot of people play with it. Very symmetrical now. There's increased the cost of the old cost of the Sharon to bring it online with the Ronin gunboat. I will say that the Sharon is better at fighting small vessels and coastal bombardment than the Ronin does, but the Ronin still has the unique ability of having a 360 turret, so it can technically still kite destroyers. So if a destroyer chases a Ronin, it can turn its turret completely around and fire backwards. The Sharon can't do that, even with its rework state. The dev specifically prevented the turret from facing all the way backwards. My opinion, that's a mistake, because now we're paying for something that is slightly inferior. Additionally, the Sharon was hit with a couple of nerfs out the bat, so you really need to be a gunboat enjoyer to make them. So it's good that the changes have been implemented. Personally, I'm not a big fan of the canopy thing, even from the Warden one. I specifically tailored my personal gameplay loop to counter Warden gunboats. So seeing a Warden gunboat in colonial form doesn't inspire great excitement from me. But that being said, Kali Navy needs a bit of a hug, as someone used to say a lot. So I do think that the change was definitely necessary. All right. So the other naval assets were the aircraft carriers. So let's talk about the Warden Mercy class aircraft carrier. I am unironically putting this in S tier, and I'm not saying that to psyops the Wardens into making them. I genuinely think that this boat is insane. I've played with it. I got to test it. It's really easy to use. It is almost no margin for error for re-equipping White Ravens to get them back in the fight. It has an AoE repair. It holds a shit ton of ordnance. It holds fuel for the entire Navy, not just the airplanes that use them. Unironically, an exceptionally good vehicle. On top of the fact that this is probably going to be the thing that you're going to park inside of ponds to protect against partisan boats. It's a really good vessel. It's and the devs recently added in changes to make it really cheap to make compared to like a proper battleship that requires naval engines. This the part to make that requires a lot of time to produce and a lot of rare materials. This one doesn't need that. It's still a little bit more expensive than most naval vessels, but it's definitely not bad. I think it's an exceptionally good vessel. I would definitely, if you're going to be defending a coastline, or if you're going to be adding it to a naval invasion, specifically for AI cover and a place for your White Ravens to rearm and redeploy, I think this is an exceptionally good asset to build. Now, I know that all the Warden commenters are going to be like, he's just saying that to trick us. It's terrible, blah, 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 blah. But I'm sorry to say this. If your argument is that this aircraft carrier sucks because it looks bad, introspect. Introspect. Seriously. Just because it looks kind of like a Titan and kind of looks like it's a copy and paste, blah, 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 doesn't mean that this is a terrible weapon. This is a better long hook defense ship. It can deploy White Ravens very quickly. You can have your own personal airfield right next to your facility if your facility is right next to a coastline. And because the Colonials don't have a dive bomber... Oh, sorry. No, they do. Just because because the Colonials don't have a torpedo bomber and the Trident still sucks ass, there's no way that Colonials can kill this thing very easily because it has 2 naval guns. 2. Yes, it has 2 naval guns, which means you can't rush it with APCs to sticky bomb it, and it doesn't suffer from being turreted from a torpedo bomber. I keep saying the things wrong. The dive bomber itself. So this thing can only be destroyed by destroyers and like battleships. It's exceptionally good. This is a great vessel if you put it within the context of a proper Warden Navy element. So I think it's a great vessel, and it is stronger than the Colonial one. The Colonial one I'm going to put it as I'll put it as A, purely because they increase the prices of frames a lot. So if you want to put dive bombers on it, you run a really big risk of putting a lot of rare alloys into something where the planes can die if they suck at landing and fall in the water. So there is a skill issue element with the Colonial aircraft carrier, whereas the Warden one is super easy. You land in water, you pick up the thing in the crane, and then you put it on your ship, and then you rearm and redeploy it, and you send it off again. Sorry to say it, but the Poseidon looks cool. Absolute wins in the drip department, sure. But in terms of usability, in terms of am I getting a return on my investment for my rare alloys and my time making the thing, I do think that the Mercy is better. This is not a PSYOPs. I'm not trying to fool anyone. I really, really do think that this is the better aircraft carrier. And I really hope we see them in action. I really hope that the Wardens aren't just saying, oh, this thing is LARP. So, yeah, we'll see. Cool. Yeah, that's aircraft carriers. I'm not a very big, large naval player, but I do think that being able to deploy dive bombers in the water to disable turrets will give a massive benefit to Conquerors and Titans to win fights. Maybe Tridents as well. But because the White Raven is really cheap to make, very spammable, and pretty good right now, having a vessel that specifically makes this thing get out all the time and have a staging area to deploy from makes it really, really, really strong. And I know a lot of Wardens saying, I can just make a couple of barges and that does the same thing. No way. No way. Actually, please, at some point, if there's a Warden naval element that makes this, try it out. Borrow it, beg for it, whatever. Try it out. It is really good. And at the end of the day, when I'm going to play Warden at one point, I'm going to make one of these things and I'm just going to park it next to my facility so that it is immune to air raids, it is immune to small ships, and generally speaking, has some extra benefits with the crane, so it can also interact with the bowhead, but that's a topic for another day. Cool. So that's it for all the new naval assets. At this point, we basically covered all the brand spanking new things that were sort of added for the main gameplay. So let's talk about the sort of supplementary things that got added as well. And again, just kind of going through the dev notes here and seeing what the significant stuff is that we have to now consider when we play the game. Cool, so let's talk about the aerial interceptor array. So this is the new bunker superstructure. This serves 2 purposes. Purpose number 1 is this provides a very wide intel radius to detect aircraft flying overhead. You built it using advanced bunkers and a facility. It does cost a little bit of rare alloys, and its main goal is to provide you with intelligence when you press the map, when you open the map and you can see an enemy aircraft coming towards your facility. That's the main thing that this thing is supposed to do. The secondary role is this thing has a spotter seat that can see very far away, extremely far away. You can use this thing to spot for defensive artillery in the most insane views that has ever been in Foxhole. So, yeah, this thing can spot enemy aircraft on the intel map, but because this thing can see up to 600 meters away with complete clarity, it just goes into S tier. If you have the opportunity to make this one and you need to spot for storm cannons hitting ships or 150s hitting targets or spotting where rocket artillery needs to go when it's used defensively, make yourself one of these things. I would even argue that if a front line hex gets one of these things up and it dries and you could use the spotter seat, that side immediately gets a massive bonus and a massive benefit to the entire outcome of that front. So it is a pseudo super weapon. It's really, really good for the utility it provides. So an exceptionally good structure. It is not LARP like a weather station, and it just performs performs its role perfectly, I think. There were some concerns to make the cone a little bit wider. Devs might play around with it, but purely because the spotter seat is insane, goes into S tier. No question about it. Cool. Let's talk about anti-aircraft guns. So I'm actually going to lump them together. So both the Kali and the Warden aircraft gun, they basically serve the same role because they use the same ammo type. There's some very, very small differences between them. But for the most part, you're going to be using this in unison with 20mm to defend your ground assets. These go into A tier. You are going to see them. They are pretty good. If you asked me like a week ago where they would fall, I would probably put them under D tier, even F tier, because they required a lot of coordination to get right. But luckily, the devs rolled it back a little bit, and they made them significantly stronger. So I think they're in a really good spot right now. Again, 3 or 4 of these in combination with 20mm anti-aircraft guns, and you're going to have an exceptionally good time. So really good. Need some pre-prep. People actually need to make them and stock ammo rooms for them. So another bit of material that's going to be taking away from other parts of the game. But if a dive bomber is coming for your facility and you need to protect your crane, this is the best way to quickly mobilize a defense against it. So exceptionally good. Maybe it goes into B tier. Actually, yeah, I'm going to put this on a B tier. The reason why is you need multiple of them. If one of these guns is able to shut down a single dive bomber, then they would go into A or maybe S tier. But because you need like 3 or 4 of these, and you kind of need an aerial interceptor array to spot the planes as they're approaching and the angle that they're approaching from, you do need multiple of them. So that's kind of like one downside to them. But maybe that's by design. Right, so I'll put it on a B tier. Could be A tier, so it kind of could go in between here. But they're definitely not completely terrible like they were when they were first released. So the devs literally did listen to some good feedback. And I'm happy in the spot that they're in right now. Cool. Let's briefly talk about the uniforms. So let's talk about the pilot uniforms. They now cost rare metal. They are essential. You're going to have to make them. But in terms of their usability outside the fact that you need them to fly planes, kind of meh. They can stack filters and medical gear. So they're kind of like a they're kind of like a combination of a partisan uniform and a tanker uniform. Look, they're okay. The problem is they cost rare metals, and over a longer duration, you kind of want to spend your rare metals into turning into rare alloys so that you can make ships and planes. So, I wouldn't use this other than the intended purpose of flying a plane with it. You can't LARP with you really won't be able to LARP with them. You'll probably get some regiment leaders yell at you if you see people running around with this thing. Oh, yeah, and disconnecting while wearing one of these things, feel bad. like it's not great. So always make sure that if you're playing around with it, you only put it on at the moment that you need it. Don't pull it out of its bunker bases unnecessarily. Don't LARP with it. And that being said, it doesn't do anything more than just fly the plane. Paratrooper uniform. I'm going to put them on B because they look cool. They do have the unique ability of stacking 20 mil. So they are pretty good as like a pseudo partisan uniform. I think I still prefer the regular partisan uniform because it has a higher chance of not being spotted by intel. So this one has a slightly lower chance. It's still good though. I think it's 20% it's 20% to be detected. So it has an 80% invisibility. But the regular partisan uniform currently sits at 75. So it's cool. And the colonial one kind of carries it because it has major drip with the beret, like I said, with the initial reaction. So yeah. At the end of the day, this thing is a way for you to put a parachute on your back, jump out the plane, and go cause trouble. But I mean, you can stack 20 more with it, so there's some frontline combat scenarios that might be useful with it as well. Also, the crates that come in is very, very efficient. 20 crates, the 20 uniforms per crate is really nice. So this might actually see just like some regular low-G gameplay loops as well. All right. Cool, so that's the uniforms. Again, not exceptionally, I would wear this all the time outside of just their intended purposes. So it's not like a engineer uniform or a tanker uniform that serves as like a builder uniform as well. I regard those ones as exceptionally good. So these don't quite fill that role. Right. So let's talk about the other assets that were added to the game. Let's talk about the ISG pull box. ISG pull box is really good. Really good. This is a decent pull box to make because it has insane range. It has the largest amount of range of any AI defense in the game currently. It outranges 80 garrisons, powered 80 garrisons. It's really good. This is an exceptionally good pull box to spam everywhere to prevent tank dives. So this is the better version of what the 80 pull box should have been. I'm really happy with it. It doesn't shoot infantry at all, which is good. But for the most part, yeah, you spam this in combination with the other pull boxes to hold an area. You're not going to stop a dedicated tank line with this. That's not the purpose of this pull box. The purpose of the pull box is to stop tank drive-bys, tank dives, and partisan sneaking a vehicle at the back and sniping something. This pull box stops that in its track. It's really good. And its engagement range and its cone of fire is exceptionally good. Not as good as maybe the 360 version of it that we're currently used to in Live War, but it ain't bad. It ain't bad. So we're definitely going to see it, and the devs did a great job adding it into the game, in my opinion. So fits the role that it's intended to serve. Cool. Let's talk about the new naval buildings. There's two of them. We have the Hullbreaker surface mine. This is an S tier building. It's made from salvage. And it fucks up small ships. And it denies partisans. It kills motorboats in one hit. It's really hard to spot. You need someone on the surface of a vessel to see it. Otherwise, if you're just basically controlling a boat without watching where you're going, you're going to be driving into these things and you're going to lose your boat so damn fast. It's S tier. It's an S tier building. It's awesome. It's really easy to maintain. It only costs salvage. Again, this is a salvage defensive building. It's really good. So make use of it. Have some fun times. And if you hear cackling on the waters, then Fortesium got you. Okay. The rudder lock. This is supposed to stop large ships, and this is supposed to stop submarines. Currently, it's not great. I'm going to put it under C tier because currently submarines can travel underneath it intentionally. So for the purposes of stopping a submarine, this doesn't stop a submarine anymore. So the devs kind of messed up with this one. Hopefully they add in a depth level of 5 meters to actually stop submarines, because right now submarines can squeeze through these mines and go and destroy your dry dock and stuff. So hoping for a buff with this one, but currently in its current state, not great. So hopefully the devs work on it a little bit. But that being said, being able to deploy them and just maintain them with maintenance tunnels or with the bellwether in maintenance mode, not bad, not bad. But needs more work. So cook a little bit more. Actually make it serve its role of stopping submarines. Devman, please. Thank you. Alrighty, so that's it for new stuff. Specifically, new things added to the game. I think I got everything. I'm not going to talk about the assembly bays or the Logi buildings. I think they're fine. They serve their purpose. I would really like the aircraft pad to not cost rare alloys, but the devs recently nerfed it from 20 alloys down to 5, so I think it's in a decent spot. All right, so the final thing to talk about is changes. So this is like things that the devs have specifically targeted to bring it in line with the Airborne update, but also just general use case changes. So again, referring here to the Devbranch notes, and I'm going to try and run through these as quickly as possible so that I can give my general impression on what these changes are and how they are going to impact the game. So again, let's quickly run through it. So first and foremost, the emplaced machine gun now shoots 20 mil. This is a much needed change because shrapnel damage is really, really good at taking out scouts and also doing damage to parts. That being said, this is not a solution to stop planes. You add this to your layered defenses. So I'm going to put this change to the both the Colonial and the Warden ones. It's the same sort of thing here. To being good against... it's good in a pinch against planes that get very low, but you layer it with flak cannons, and then it's exceptionally good. So I'm going to put this under C tier. Without this change, the 12.7 version of the guns were just outright worse. So if this change didn't take place, then the existing EMGs with their 12.7 damage, which doesn't do much to airframes or airplane parts, would have gone under F tier. But devs definitely cooked with this one a little bit. So it actually does harm planes in combination with other assets. So I think it performs its role really, really well. Not exceptional. Again, you won't snipe out a bomber with this thing, but have like 5 or 6 of these, plus 3 or 4 flak guns, and you have a decent defense against nasty little airmen coming and causing trouble in your backline. Alright, the next change is to the long hook. It's also the bluefin, but we don't see bluefins that much, so I kind of isolated this one to the long hook itself. So the long hook now can spot air and ground targets at 350 meters range. This is an insane buff. This is an insane buff for the long hook to defend choke points against small naval assets. So I'm going to put this under A tier. This is an exceptionally good change for the long hook. So it is now able to actually properly convey intelligence. You build one, you deploy it, you keep it there for the rest of the war, and it keeps partisans from just freely roaming where they want with small boats. Really good change. Very happy with it. We're definitely going to be making use of it in the coming wars, as we are most likely going to be deploying ships to defend our waterways. Cool. The next thing is, so the icon here is for the shipyard, but this is indicative of the changes to small ship defense against armor-piercing damage. This is specifically to make armor-piercing ammo much more effective against small vessels. This is quite significant if you are doing freighter and dust crocodile logi. You have to be aware that in-placed guns, so arc RPG launchers, 68 Leary defensive guns, as well as the new changes to the large ships and their turrets, now firing 68 mil, will make your ship get disabled much faster. So I'm going to put it under B tier. I like the change. It is relatively significant, but most damage to small vessels is most likely going to come from scout planes and some of the new sort of light ships. So this is more a tweak to large ships not being threatened by smaller vessels. So the big thing to keep in mind with this change is small vessels are less impactful against large ships. Basically, if you want to fight large ships, you need to roll out your own large ships or bring out a torpedo bomber. That's the core crux of this. So small ship changes or small ship combat changes, pretty insignificant. Small ship versus large ships, this is where the real thing needs to come into play. And because most people don't play in large ships, it's like public large ships aren't really a thing. Pretty insignificant change for the majority of damage types that small ships are going to be involved with. Might be wrong with this one, but my gut reaction is avoid coastal regions with player man defenses, and you should be fine. And avoid large ships, and this won't be too significant to you. All right. The next thing to talk about is going to be there was a universal change to damage types to all large ships. I'm going to represent this by one large ship icon with this yellow border. So this is the majority of large ships now fire 68 mil and had their turrets tweaked, with the exception of the Black Steel that got a direct nerf. Most ships now perform slightly better if you have the correct amount of players manning them appropriately. Now, I know that there is some drama / conflict with, the colonial ships are much weaker now because you need more people manning the ships. But I am of the opinion that game assets need to be used optimally. And in an optimal situation, you have enough people feeding your turrets shells. Therefore, if it is being used correctly, these turrets will now be able to fire more effectively. And once you get in the rhythm of providing shells to it and providing logi to these turrets correctly, I think overall their performance is going to increase. So I think that the changes to large ships overall for large ship players is neutral. Not the greatest because you don't always have enough people playing it, but if and when it is used correctly across the board, I do think is quite good to have. So ships firing 68 mil and ships reloading all their turrets all in one go, I think is a good change. It's not an exceptional change. It definitely goes under A tier, and it definitely also is not S tier either. But I think it's an overall good quality of life change, and it also means that large ships can now defend themselves against small ships much more easily. So gunboat swarms, much less effective now because of these changes. So we'll see how that plays out. Cool. Howitzer changes. Oh, whoops. Howitzer changes. There we go. So howitzers now have less range when they're tier 1 and tier 2. This is an S tier change. Sorry, builders. Sorry, tier 2 slop spam enjoyers. Howitzers was the main reason why artillery was shut down. We couldn't have used 120 guns or mortars for the longest time. For over a year now, I'm sick and tired of it. I want to use 120 guns. I want to use mortars. And the nerf to howitzers, in my opinion, is a great change. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is a great change, and this is the most significant change to the Boulder update since the Boulder update released. Tier 2 slop is not the perfect solution to stop artillery now. You might actually have to roll out if you're on the Warden side, you're going to have to roll out a Harbinger to snipe the Collie 120 guns with your 14.5 turret. And if you're on the Colonial side, you're going to have to use Scouts, and you're going to have to use the dive bombers to intercept the Warden artillery before they get set up, or to snipe out their shells. All right, that's just the way I see it. The howitzer being the perfect defense against defensive artillery or into attacking artillery, that era is now over. So I'm happy to see it. Okay, AT pillbox. So AT pillbox. So because the ISG pillbox got added, this now shoots 14.5. It sucks at actually shooting armor targets. It doesn't kill any major targets at all. But it taps partisans that don't watch out where they're going. S tier change. I love it. This is a great change. I know a lot of Warden partisans are very upset for this one, and they wanted to get it nerfed immediately when it was announced. But as a facility main player, and as someone who needs to protect my Logi lines, I'm going to be building a lot of these things. So if you see lines and lines and lines of these AT pillboxes everywhere, you probably will see my tag on them. I think it's a great change. It's a universal pillbox that most players can now build and get something out of it. Yeah, it won't stop an outlaw. Don't get me wrong. If you want to stop an outlaw, I don't think there's any pillbox that you could build that will stop an outlaw. But this thing claps paratroopers. This thing claps sticky rushers. This thing claps the suicide trucks and whatnot. So I don't think it's useless. I think it's great. It forces the enemy to use explosives to kill it so that they can go and actually go toward the target that they want to hit. So this creates a really good buffer structure that you can just throw up and forget about it. So I think the AT pillbox is a great change. It forces partisans to bring explosives on their runs. And that being said, I am a partisan player, and I'm more than happy to now bring a Lunaire part of my squad to kill these things so that I can go and sticky rush your tank line. So I like the change. They have a ridiculously high rate of fire now. That they got buffed on the very last day. So great to see it. So we'll see how it plays out. Cool. The next thing is Railstorm cannons are now cheaper. Meh. They are such a pain to set up. They get countered by dive bombers. A Harbinger can suicide by landing next to one of these things and killing it by unloading all its shells before people can actually get enough damage on a Harbinger to destroy the Railstorm. To destroy the Harbinger before a Railstorm cannon goes down. So in my opinion, the change to the Railstorm cannon being cheaper is a very, very meh change for the majority of the player base. The majority of the player bases never really got to play with this thing because it's incredibly hard to build. It takes forever. It's very expensive. You need a special pad to make them. You need a special location to store it. And you need an entire rail network to actually use the thing and put it into position. So it being cheaper doesn't solve the problem with the Railstorm cannon. And honestly speaking, this is the main reason why the F tier exists. Just so I can put the Railstorm cannon change in here. Devs need to make more. Devs need to do more with the Railstorm cannon, other than the fact that it is now cheaper to make. It's still a pain to field. You can't fire an entire pallet with barrel heating applied to it. There needs to be more changes to the Railstorm cannon because right now we're just not going to see them. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Maybe you might have one large regiment make one. We might make one in the coming war, but it's going to be in a very, very specific scenario because airplanes are very expensive. I'd rather spend the alloys making 3 bombers, proper large bombers that can actually kill things and survive, as opposed to bringing up a Railstorm cannon to fire 20 shells and then wait an hour for it to die to a Harbinger landing next to it. So, yeah, I'm not very excited about the change. Very lackluster. The devs need to work on it a little bit more. Pseudo same reason for the Storm Cannon, except the Storm Cannon is good for clapping large ships. In combination with the Hullbreaker minefields and to a degree the surface rudder lock minefields can make a really good coastal defense against naval invasions. So a cheaper Storm Cannon, because the Storm Cannon price got halved for rare alloys. Pretty good change. Definitely a buff to naval defenders. Doesn't really affect the Storm Cannon duelers on the front line. As I also think that paratroopers are now a pretty good way to counter Storm Cannons, specifically if they're wet concrete. So yeah, I'll have to see. So good change for the Storm Cannon. But Railstorm Cannon, way too much effort to actually field. Okay, and then finally, the final change is the satchel change. So the devs went and they made the satchel completely symmetrical with the Hydra's Whisper. It's basically completely symmetrical now. Same price, large item. Can't fat walk 6 or 7 of these into an underground fortress to kill it or whatever. This is one of those situations where I kind of like the asymmetry of the satchel compared to the Hydra's Whisper. So this used to be a nice little toy to get when you're a colonial partisan, because now you can sort of like shock warden builders by hitting them with satchels in build patterns that they weren't they were using build patterns where they weren't expecting satchels to be a thing. But because satchels are now Hydras, they're exactly the same as Hydras currently. I'm not a big fan of this because it's a little bit too symmetrical. I would have liked the I would have liked the satchel to be a large item for balance reasons, and that's basically what the devs decided to do because they didn't want the Warden paratrooper plane to be exceptionally good by dropping satchel carrying maniacs into your facility buildings. But I feel like they need to take a look at how they can make this a little bit more interesting with the asymmetrical aspect to it. Maybe give it more damage or higher breach chance, but remove the ability to damage barbed wire and stuff. But I think as an interim solution, I think it's perfectly fine. Not game breaking, not massively significant, but it definitely is something that's noteworthy. All right. So that's it for the major updates or the major content in the update itself. Again, there was a lots of other small changes that the devs also introduced. But I think these were the significant ones that I wanted to talk about. So this is essentially the tier list to play around with. Out of all of these, I think the most significant things to be aware of is definitely the White Raven's ability to be built and deployed out of facilities for QRF. The Myrmidon is going to completely shape how Wardens do tank lines. Bombers end the game. The siege boats are going to completely destroy island gameplay unless you use minefields to defend them or to stop them. I do think that the Mercy is an insane aircraft carrier, better than the Poseidon in my opinion. I might be wrong, but I definitely think that, and it's going to be game-changing in the way that it defends areas. And then the funny salvage sea mine field, the massively OP spotter seat in the aircraft interceptor array, and then of course howitzer nerf, love it. 80 garrisons, 80 garrisons, 80 pull boxes stopping partisans and paratroopers. Love to see it. Gonna be definitely building them, so keep an eye out for that. Okay, that's it. Very long video. Very excited to see the Airborne update. The Airborne update is starting on the 9th of February. Get your pilot uniforms ready. Get your screw hammers ready. Very excited to see what the actual war plays out with. So at this point, hopefully there's not going to be any major changes that is going to be affecting the game itself besides bug fixes. Always love bug fixes. So just want to point out that DevMan has been doing really well at addressing concerns from the community over the last 3 weeks, even with the most chaotic Devbranch I've ever personally played in. Very excited to see how the actual war plays out now. And I do think that this tier list might be reflected in how things are going to be built and what assets are going to be seeing action throughout the coming war. All right, that's it for me. Thanks for listening in. See you out on the airfield and the battlefield. And best of luck for the coming war. That is the Airborne update. Yep, that's me, Legendary, signing off.